Welcome back. My name's Alden Reed. Thank you for joining me on my various channels. So, I'd like to talk a little bit more generally about color tribes. I've introduced a couple videos and I definitely recommend that you go watch them so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. This video won't make a ton of sense maybe if you don't watch some of those videos first, so you can see them. They're on all of my various channels, so they should be pretty easy to access. And I've got 3 videos, 2 that are 30 minutes and then a longer 80-minute video, and that'll really give you a crash course into what's going on here. And I really can't express enough just how excited I am to share with you so much more information about color tribes. But what I have to share goes much deeper than just color tribes, because while it is obviously wondrous and amazing and spectacular that humanity is divided into these 12 different color tribes and that these color tribes are symbolized by various sets of metaphysical energy, which very closely do correspond to our understanding of astrological signs, they also correspond to so many other things as well. Really, this is about so much more than just people and humanity and understanding people. It is primarily about that. That's what it is about more than anything else. It's about helping us understand human diversity, helping us understand the ways in which we are slightly different from each other, helping us understand why it is that we build different ethnicities and nationalities and cultures. And I'm very excited to do all of that. But what you'll start to realize is that this goes much deeper, right? So the color tribes is all about what I like to call metaphysical ethnography, which is just my term for sort of describing this science, this spiritual science that I am developing. And obviously it's really amazing. I mean, it took me a long time to even understand this. And really it's only because I have spent so much time just reading about history and learning about cultures and all these different peoples in the world that I started to see these patterns show up. And I didn't really know what to make of them at a younger age, especially before I became a little bit more attuned to the metaphysical realities of the world, of the universe, right? But as I started to learn more about metaphysics, as I started to learn more about astrology and chakras and archetypes and all sorts of other things, I realized it really is just as so many people say, as above, so below. You see, so many things in reality, including human beings, are coded with these primal raw energy signatures, right? These universal energy signatures. There are 15 of them. And I will talk more specifically about energy signatures separately as it relates to color tribes as well in future videos, although I do touch on it a little bit in some of the videos on color tribes that I've already talked about. It's pretty important to understand in order to understand color tribes. But I will address it more specifically in its own right because it's very important, right? Because these universal energy signatures, they're everywhere. And while I am using a lot of astrological terminology to help us understand what different color tribes are about and what their different color energies are like, it's important to understand that there's something higher than both color tribes and astrology, and that is universal energy signatures. And these really are the primal building blocks of the universe. So all the basic sort of qualities, modalities, ways of being, it's hard to describe. It's quite elusive because they are fundamental building blocks in and of themselves. We can only sort of describe them by using the terminology of the things that they create. So it's easier to see them in action than it is to exactly describe them. But these patterns run through so many different things. They govern chakras, they govern color tribes, they govern astrology, they govern divine archetypes, and there are so many other things as well. And in many ways, all of these core things are just coded in so many just basic layers of reality, even in the actual physical landscape. And we'll talk a lot about that more in the future as well. But metaphysical symbology, besides showing us all these beautiful relationships and patterns and helping us understand ourselves and other people much better, also helps us understand something very, very, very important. And that is that the universe is the product of divine creation. It is the product of divine intelligence. There is a supreme divine intelligent force which guides and governs everything. And yes, we are absolutely part of this force. There is absolutely a very meaningful way in which we are a part of God, in which we even are a sliver of the divine. We are, in a microcosmic sense, God itself. But for practical purposes, it's very important to understand that the way the universe operates, there still is a sense of difference, okay? We couldn't have this experience. We couldn't be here. We couldn't be doing these things if we didn't understand that there's sort of these multiple levels of being, right? So just because we are part of God and sort of connected to God doesn't mean that we are the totality of God, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? So all of us together, everything put together, is also this massive metaphysical spiritual superorganism which does have a consciousness and is kindly and lovingly and benevolently watching over all of us. And one of the things that God does, because God is very playful, is that God codes reality with all of these symbolic relationships, all of these layers of symbolic meaning. And again, it's not just so that we can understand reality together better, so that we can understand the Maya, so that we can understand the current simulation of the universe that we are running, but it's also so that we can connect with the divine, so that we can know that we all are just part of this massive metaphysical spiritual simulation. Because you can't really explain these relationships, right? These correspondences, this symbology. There's no other explanation other than there is a God, a divine creative force, which is in charge of structuring the universe and gently guiding us through it while we go on our journeys and have fun and do all the things that we like to do. And that's what the universe is really all about. I wasn't sure if I was going to go here, but you know what? I'm going here, okay? Do you want to know what the meaning of life is? It's very, very, very simple. We're just having a story. It's just story time. All life is one long, never-ending story. And we incarnate, and we come down, and we pick all these qualities and different vessels and worlds and planets and dimensions and all this stuff, just so that we can play and have fun and experience new things. And yes, there's a sense of spiritual evolution and growth. Absolutely, that's a part of it. But it's important to not get too caught up in that. What do you think happens when, we all wake up, right? And we're all like, oh my God, we're all God. It was just a simulation after all. We create another simulation and we go back to sleep. This universe was created and one day it will end. And that's cool. That's just how it works. But reality will continue. God will continue. The consciousness will continue. Love will continue. And we'll create a new universe. And God will continue to direct that. And it's just so that we can be actors and have never-ending stories. That's all it really is, okay? It's important to not get too caught up in the idea of spiritual evolution. Now, we are in the process of a rather spectacular spiritual evolution, so I can understand that might sound a little bit funny. I don't mean to throw cold water on it. What is happening and what is really going to be happening very soon is awesome. And definitely a lot of the terms and ways in which people describe this are accurate, for sure. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter that much in a sense, okay? It's okay. It's always going to be okay. Your consciousness is eternal. The universe, this specific universe will end, but another one will be created. transmigrate there, and we'll just continue doing our thing. We are but actors on the stage, and the world is our play, just as the great bard said. That's all it really is. You don't have to go deeper than that. It's not more profound than that. Now, people get very caught up in the simulation, and that often causes more suffering than maybe we might have bargained for at times. But that's okay. That's just part of it, right? There has to be a certain level of bad things that happen in reality. I know that's a tough thing to hear. For there to be any reality, right? Now, that doesn't mean that things always need to be bad, okay? In fact, as I said, we are moving to a state where things are going to be so much better. And what we define as quote unquote bad is going to be trivial compared to just one day's worth of news in what is bad right now, okay? So absolutely, I really be hopeful. Wonderful and great things are happening. But we go through this over and over again in different planets and worlds and dimensions and universes. Go through these different states, right? Higher state into a lower state. A lot of peace and community and cooperation, and then more selfishness and war and domination and things like that. And it goes in these cycles and these patterns. And it is, to a certain extent, spiraling in a positive direction ultimately. But it's all just part of the play, right? There's always going to be some drama. That's the better way to put it, right? Now, we don't want to think of it as bad, right? But maybe a little bit more neutral. It's drama, right? It's a never-ending story. There's going to be some heroes. There's going to be some villains. And that's okay. Because otherwise existence wouldn't be compelling. And that's not an excuse to just go out there and do a lot of bad things. I strongly encourage you to be good and loving and caring. But know that from time to time, sometimes, especially like lately here, things might get a little bit bad. Because there are other people in this universe, right? So there's God, the unified sense of everything. And then there's us as our little fractals. But then there's all these other little fractal souls, right, going around. And we all have free will. They have free will too. And sometimes they choose to be a little naughty, to put it mildly. And in a deep philosophical sense, we are kind of grateful for that, as weird as that is to say, because it's necessary for the universe to exist. Again, not to say that that always has to be the case. We're moving to a place where that's going to be so much less so. And the kind of mischief and drama that we're going to be dealing with, even just in less than 100 years, is going to be so much more mild and benign than compared to just the very difficult and traumatic things that are going on right now and have been going on in this world for quite some time. It's important, though, to always keep in mind that it's just a simulation. So there's a lot of things, and they might seem a little paradoxical, right? We ultimately really want to have fun and be loving and just build and create and do all this stuff. But then there's got to be also some level of destruction, and there's got to be some level of balance. So there's going to be these mischievous things going on, these mischievous people, these mischievous forces, right? Most people are on the benign side. Most people are generally trying to do good things, okay? But it's important to remember that it's just a simulation. So you're trying to care about what you're doing because it is meaningful, right? Meaningful because you make it meaningful, okay? In the very basic existential sense. We give meaning to the universe. It's not that the universe is truly meaningless, even though it might seem so from a certain perspective. It's more just that we ascribe the meaning. Things are meaningful because they're fun to us, because we have these stories, we play these roles, and we do all these things, okay? But at the same time, it's important to not take yourself too seriously. And that's why it's important to remember that it is a simulation, that you are an actor, you're an eternal soul playing over and over again. And obviously, as you might imagine, the people that don't know that are usually the people that are kind of up to the most mischief, because they're really deep in it. And again, to a certain extent, that's okay. That's part of their story. That's part of their role. That's part of what they came here to do. And it might seem contradictory. It is a little paradoxical. The universe is just an arbitrary simulation that we create to have fun, but it's also chock full of meaning that we give it because we're having fun being creators and just doing stuff. And what color tribes and all these systems of metaphysical symbology can tell you is that there is a divine creator. You can see the handiwork of God everywhere. And this is not going to prove to you in a modern scientific sense that God is real or that God created the universe or really almost any of the things I just said, right? Because that's impossible, okay? Modern science is about conducting experiments in laboratories that you can do over and over again, right, and reproduce the same results. But guess what? We're in the universe. You can't get outside the universe to conduct an experiment. So if that's the standard of proof that you're going to hold, you will be eternally a skeptic. Even so, though, I'd like to challenge you. I have wonderful, beautiful things to show you. Wonderful patterns and symbolic relationships that really honestly can only be explained by the presence of a divine creator, by the presence of God everywhere, written in all things. And so color tribes, yes, primarily about helping us understand ourselves, understanding these physical vessels, understanding human beings, understanding the ethnic groups and the nationalities and the cultures and the attitudes and the perspectives and the values that each people from different color tribes hold. And understanding how that integrates with other systems, right? With divine archetypes, with personal astrology, with chakras. Those are sort of the four big systems, and they're all corresponding in these beautiful ways together, but they're also somewhat unique and different, right? There's a lot of overlap, but they're not exactly the same thing. Astrology works in one way, color tribes works in another way, divine archetypes works in yet another way, and then chakras are sort of this unifying system which aids in our spiritual growth and evolution. There is so much more to say, and I will be here every day, probably several times a day even, shining some more light on all these wondrous mysteries and goings on. So thank you so much. As always, I love you so very much. And God loves you so very much. Many blessings. I'll see you again soon.